Hi everyone, and today I am going to start my presentation. So, here I go. Imagine a person committing a crime. They shoot a guy. In your head, you're thinking, wow, that's horrible. Put him in jail. Take him to court, right? Immediately, you'd think that. But take a step back. Think for a second. Did the person consciously choose to pull the trigger, or did a biological algorithm in their brain fire off a command milliseconds before the action even took place or before they even realized what was happening? See, that split second gap between brain chemistry and conscious thought is currently forcing people to question the entire foundation of the justice system. Legal The legal framework people or humans built over centuries relies entirely on the philosophical idea of free will and a guilty mind to justify punishing people. However, modern neuroscience is exposing this as a biological impossibility. Right. So, as neuroscience increasingly maps out the unconscious origins of people's choices, how can their justice system balance the biological data of determinism with the traditional societal need for moral accountability? Right. So, the readiness potential and modern neuroimaging reveal excuse me, that their actions are initiated by unconscious biological processes and and excuse me and heavily implying that their brains execute the code like a computer rather than making independent choices, absolutely independent. So to understand the clash with the law, it is necessary to look at how their brains actually initiate movement. So, scientists measure electrical charges in the brain to track exactly when a decision is made versus when a person feels like they made a decision. Example: Benjamin Libet. Benjamin Libet, right? This guy made an experiment in 1983, demonstrated that the readiness potential and electrical charge in the brain fires milliseconds before people are consciously aware of their intention to act at all, right? So this data exposes the biological reality of of these voluntary acts that are initiated entirely unconsciously, right? Deflating the concept that they possess total uninfluenced freedom over their own action. So top so despite this biological reality, the current justice system stubbornly operates on the outdated philosophical ethical assumption that people possess ultimate conscious moral agency. The entire mechanism of their penal system completely ignores the neuroscience and demands that a person could have chosen otherwise. For a conviction, the law requires a guilty mind. If their cerebral biology dictates behavior, holding them morally responsible makes zero philosophical sense. Example, right? So, prominent voices in the Frontiers in Psychology article notes that the basic presumption of punitive justice are being undermined because the law still relies on retributive model, punishing them for choices that the brain data says they didn't consciously make. Right? So this highlights the massive disconnect between verifiable neurological evidence and a century-old unscientific assumption that courts use to lock people up, right? So if free will is fundamentally a hallucination, society must transition away from retributive punishment and instead adopt a pragmatic quarantine rehab for and model for individuals who pose a threat, right? So acknowledging biological determinism does not mean letting dangerous individuals walk free. it changes why they are confined. So instead of inflicting suffering as revenge for moral failing, the system shifts to a public health framework. Right? So research suggests the legal system needs to shed its harshest retributivist instincts and focus on strategic interventions and rehab to combat the mass incarceration. This exposes a potential future where the justice system manages risk based on biological environmental reality and punishing them for an illusion of choices, right? So with all that being said, the collision between neuroscientists expanding understanding of their brain chemistry and their traditional legal framework is not going away, right? On the contrary, by examining neuroscientific data on the decision making, the legal system's rigid reliance on a guilty mind, and the potential alternative like rehab models, it becomes clear that society is facing a massive philosophical crisis. Right? So let me ask you this. If free will is an illusion, is throwing people in prison just socially acceptable retaliation instead of actual justice? Let that question sink in. Thank you for listening to me.